Well, the political landscape in Saskatchewan is shifting. Last week, we learned 4 high-profile Sask Party MLAs will not be running again in the next election. That's Donna Harpauer, Don Morgan, Gord Wyant, and Dustin Duncan. And add this to the list of other MLAs who have either resigned, been kicked out of the party, or have previously stated they're not running again. There will be a massive changing of the guard. So today on Blue Sky, we're looking back at the history of the Saskatchewan Party. We'll look at what these departures mean for the party and where that leaves the Sask Party going forward. We'll be joined by 2 of the founding members of the Saskatchewan Party, Ken Kravets and June Droughty. And we also want to hear from you. How have you seen the Sask Party change over the years? How do you think these departures will affect the party going forward? You can call 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Joining me in studio for today's show are Gail and Ken Kravets. Gail is the author of the book, Risk and Reward, The Birth of the Saskatchewan Party. Gail, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you for having me.
And Ken Kravets was one of the original 8 Saskatchewan Party members. He was first elected to the legislature in 1995 as a Liberal. 2 years later, he was part of a coalition that formed the Saskatchewan Party. Ken Kravets served as Deputy Premier under Brad Wall and served as Minister of Education and Finance. He retired in 2016, but has been watching with interest these latest developments for the party he helped form. And so, Ken, welcome to Blue Sky as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Alicia, for having me.
It's great to have both of you here. So before we get into some of the more recent changes and you know, looking forward, I'd like you to take us back to when the Saskatchewan Party was formed. Ken, what was the mood like in the province politically at the time?
Well, I think across the province, from north to south, east to west, there was always a feeling that Saskatchewan could do much better. That we were a province that had been referred to as the wee province, and that we were always going to have equalization payments from Ottawa. And with the resources and the people that are in this province, there were many who approached us as elected members of the legislature to say, you know what, we can be much better, and we don't believe that the current government was taking us in that direction. So it was a feeling that was spreading across Saskatchewan. There were many who, in my first year of being an elected official, we always had students come into the legislature, and many times there'd be especially grade 12 students who would say their goal was to leave and get a job somewhere else, not Saskatchewan. So that was the feeling that I think many of us as politicians felt.
Gail, what were you observing at the time? How would you answer that question? What was the mood like in the province politically at that time?
Well, I think I'd echo pretty much what Ken said. I was teaching school, and I noticed that as well. Grade 12 students, if they were going on to post-secondary or trade school, they might do that in the province, but so many of them were looking west. They were going to Alberta, and it was sad to see that. The joke at the time was the grad present would always be a set of luggage. And it might have been a joke, but it really wasn't very funny. And so when Ken said he was going to go into politics, I wasn't surprised by that. But we knew it was going to be a challenge at that time. The NDP they were a dynasty. They were a juggernaut in the province. So we knew it would be a tough go. But we both of us felt that this province could be so much more.
So Ken, tell me about those early days, because you came into this as somebody who was elected to the legislature as a Liberal. You formed a coalition with Conservatives. And so how did you politically line up? What were those early days like trying to formulate what this party was going to stand for?
Well, there was when we formed the party in 1997, really, we began from scratch. There were no guiding principles. There were no, there wasn't a lot of money either. So, but what we found out very quickly in the 4 Conservative members and the 4 Liberal members, that there were many more things that we agreed upon than what we disagreed upon. So it wasn't difficult to actually, form the party and come up with a plan, principles that still exist today as to what we could do to improve. So the relationship between the 8 was a team effort, and we knew it was going to be a challenge in forming a party. The political landscape in Saskatchewan was such that the NDP were there for many years, but the belief was that a center, maybe slightly right-leaning party like the Saskatchewan Party could unite the public in a unified way to move forward and become government. It took us a while. The Saskatchewan Party was in opposition for 10 years, from 1997 to 2007. So it gave us an opportunity to build the party, to build policy, and to indeed have something ready for the public in 2007 when we accepted the challenge of being elected to government.
So you agreed on a lot with the Conservatives that you formed the party with, but the things you didn't agree on, what did you disagree on?
Well, the other thing, the thing that happened behind closed doors as we moved forward was how we would approach, moving government out of being the principal body. There are still a role for government, and maybe that's where we disagreed upon on some things. But again, it was not necessarily the 4 Conservative members versus the 4 Liberal members. There were times when we had debates at our caucus level where the decision was 6-2, and 2 of the people were one Liberal and one former Conservative who had an idea. But those things were dealt with at caucus, where we discussed policy and what it would do. The other part, I think that people, I know that people know this, but we were a provincial political party. We did not have ties to the federal Liberals. We did not have ties at that time to the PC party federally or the New Democrats. So it gave us the opportunity to build a political vision in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, you say Liberal today, and it has a bit of a different meaning, doesn't it? Right? I think that some people, and this will come up again with June Drowdy, who's on the show today as well, that Liberal has become a bit of a dirty word for many in the Sask Party, and so the evolution of that. I mean, do you still talk about those early days as a Liberal, Ken, or have your ideas shifted over time? I'm interested in that evolution.
No, I don't think my ideals have shifted at all. I mean, we are still a center-right party, and you have to ensure that your policies actually reflect that. You want to have the ability to put forward ideas to the middle ground. That's where the majority of the people are. There are hard left-wing people, and there are hard right-wing people in every province, in every political party. So what you have to do is build policy that reflects the majority.
But where is the party today? Where does the Sask Party land today? Would you still call them center-right, or have they moved more to the right?
Well, there are policies that many will see that probably will reflect a greater movement to the right. And I think that is always a concern for any political party as you're moving, whether it be the NDP on the left or the Saskatchewan Party from the middle to the right. There are always policies that will reflect it, or the people who believe that the policy is catering to the far right. The discussion that occurs at the political level is one that you have to be able to debate any issue, because over the last, especially 4 years, I mean, as I look at the party today, I mean, there have been really a lot of challenges that the government, the Sask Party, has faced. It's not different than previous years under the NDP, but every party has to have that discussion and be able to recognize what is the best policy for the province of Saskatchewan.
We're going to hear from June Drowdy in just a moment, but Gail, I want to give you an opportunity to characterize the Sask Party today. Is it still a center-right party, or has it moved more to the right?
Well, it's an interesting question, because basically I'm the author of the book and I'm more of a historian, but I watch the politics carefully, and I'm always mindful of the fact that where the majority of people stand, and it's in the center. When I was writing the book, So many people that I interviewed that were reporters, Dale Eisler, Professor Courtney, the late Joe Garcia, they all really emphasized how important it was to owning the middle or just right of center. So, yeah, there might have been, I think, some shift from what I see originally because we have lost members that were, from that liberal spectrum. But I think the party is still holding true to those original principles.
Okay, well, we'll talk more about this. My guests today are Ken and Gail Kravetz. And so Gail Kravetz, the author of the book Risk and Reward, The Birth of the Saskatchewan Party. Ken Kravetz, one of the original 8 Saskatchewan Party members. Now, June Drowdy has been described as the matriarch of the Saskatchewan Party. She was first elected to the legislature as a Liberal as well in 1995. And 2 years later, she was one of the original 8 who brought together people with different political backgrounds to form the Sask Party. Drowdy served as Minister of First Nations and Métis Relations under Premier Brad Wall. She's also been responsible for Crown Corporations and SGI and served as Minister of Social Services. She retired in 2016 after nearly 2 decades in politics, but she, as one might expect, still follows politics in this province closely. So June Drowdy is on a plane at the moment. We caught up with her earlier, and I asked her what the loss of the 4 most recent high-profile MLAs means to this party.
I totally respect the fact that some of the MLAs and ministers that have been there for a while have said, it's time to let the new ones, not necessarily young, but new people come in and make sure that their voice is heard. That's what government has to do.
Who are the new people? I mean, the party's losing some heavy hitters, big portfolios, right? Voices that we are familiar with. They've carried a lot of weight. So who's next? Who is coming up?
Well, I don't know all the new ones that are taking the place of some of the ones that have stepped down, but there's there will be new ones. Think about it. When we started government in 25 years ago, just about 26 years ago, none of us had been even in government except for Don Toth, and none of us had been cabinet ministers. And we made our way. We made mistakes and admitted it. The first thing I did was not being able to find the Premier's office. So there's a naivety there that maybe the new ones won't have that because they will have support. But we learned it, and I think that's a message that will and should be sent to new MLAs, is that this is a chance for doing things differently and for listening. I've got to be hopeful. I'm the matriarch of this party.
But who do you think the party is listening to right now? Who has the ear of the Saskatchewan Party decision makers these days? I think people are wondering about the influence of the Buffalo Party as they try and steal away votes from the political right. So who has the ear of the Saskatchewan Party right now?
I can't honestly say I know the answer to that one. I think the SUP party has put some fear in government, thinking that they aren't right-wing enough. I think the majority of people are more like me. They are the middle of the road type of people. We're not as loud as the SUP party, or if the Buffalo Party is still there, I'm not sure. But we are the ones that wake up every morning knowing that we need to, there are things that we need in our constituency that government has to have, and there are things we can look after ourselves. When I think about starting the party and the guiding principles that we have, they still make sense to me. And I think that's the ones that'll make sense to the new people that'll come in, and hopefully the ones that the government is listening to right now. There's some MLAs right now, like Jim in the North, who is bringing a perspective that is good for government, and I'm just very hopeful that that's where we'll turn to.
What about the others though? Because does this party still represent the June Drowdy from the 90s? And if you're losing a moderate politician like Gord Wydant, as an example, who is stepping away, so does this party still align with your values?
Most of the time it does, yes. I think I feel like somebody who has a teenager that's gone astray at times, and you know very well that they know that they know things can be different. But I also know that there are obstacles right now with the government, with federal government. I think COVID made a huge difference. Something that I didn't live through it. I didn't live through being in government during COVID time, which changed so much. It changed all of us out here, but it also changed government. So I think it's getting back to being okay, to not be always, to not be, the political correctness is important, but at the same time, you've got to be able to say what's on your mind. And it's, I haven't been around the caucus table for 10 years, like you said.
But you're probably following the headlines. And so when hasn't the Saskatchewan Party been in line with where you think it should be? Do you have an example of when you've wondered, wait, what's going on here in the party that I helped found?
Most of my issues are the social issues. So I'm when there's changes in things like support for people who are vulnerable, I always ask myself, what happens in the background? Where's the discussions going? I want to make sure that the work with the Indigenous people, our First Nations, that can be a real asset to our province. I think that's something that listen to. It's really different when you're elected. You know what's behind the headline. You know there's always a story behind it. When you aren't elected and you just read the headlines, you think, how did this happen?
But are you questioning how we got to this point with changes to social assistance, to SIS? I mean, housing and the housing crisis and people who are struggling, that's in the headlines all the time. And we see it definitely in the city where I live. So are you wondering what's going on there?
Yeah, I do. I'll give you an example of it. To say that that we want people to be more independent, and that so we should send them their rent checks, and then they'll just pay their rent. And we found out that didn't work for the majority of people. So the question is, should there have been more support? Should there have been more education? There should have been. What could we have done to consult with not only the landowners, the property owners, but the people who had the checks themselves? Because we don't need anybody feeling even more vulnerable.
What about some other things that have been in the news lately? The labor unrest with the teachers. We've seen nurses going public with concerns about our provincial healthcare system. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's always going to be something that people are frustrated about, or I'm glad I'm not sitting around the table with some of those issues right now. Although I did sit on Treasury Board for a long time, I think they are discussing it. But I think that there has to be more of a consultation with the people that are affected, and that is what I talked about from the beginning. I think the MLAs and the ministers, the consultation part is absolutely important if people can feel like they have a voice.
Has the party moved too far to the right?
It's moved a long way to the right. I don't too far. It's objective because so much has changed. The way everybody has changed. I blame it on COVID. I blame it on a lot of things, but people are looking at when we look south and see that Trump is still making headways, and yet he's so far right I can't see him. Are people thinking that way? Not everybody, though. I honestly believe that there are more people like me than the people that are really far right, and to find that balance is the work of government.
So how will the Sask Party find that balance? What do you think the party needs to do to be successful going forward?
I think it needs to be making sure that the representatives, the MLAs, are listening to their constituents. That the majority of them can knock on a door, can pick up a phone and talk to them. And I know they think they're doing it, but and they probably are. But honestly, it's a different world when you're in government than in opposition.
Does it concern you that the party is making decisions from often what sounds like a small but very vocal minority? I mean, I'm thinking about the pronoun policy. Does it concern you that the party might be making some decisions from a small vocal minority?
Yes, it does. It does, but I also know that there must have been a discussion that made them believe this is the right thing to do, and there's always. I think I said at the beginning that everything has its time, and things are cyclical, even politics. But I think that is. We have the opportunity right now to do the listening and go back to the days when people were excited to be in that building and honored and privileged to be a part of the decision making. And I think that the general public have to speak. Not this whole idea of texting or Facebook or however you think you're communicating with somebody. There's something called conversations, and I think that has to be happening.
June Drowdy, I thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Drowdy was one of the original 8 founding members of the Saskatchewan Party. She served in politics in this province for nearly 20 years. We are looking back at how the Sask Party formed to help us understand the present and where the party might go from here after learning that 4 big names are going to be stepping away from the party, from politics at this point. And so our guests today are Ken Kravetz and Gail Kravetz. Ken Kravetz, one of the original 8 Saskatchewan Party members as well, and Gail Kravetz, the author of Risk and Reward, The Birth of the Saskatchewan Party. We invite you to call to join the conversation, 1-800-716-2221, or email bluesky@cbc.ca. First, though, let's check in with David Shield, who joins us. David, what's making news?
Well, a new study from the University of Saskatchewan shows many people across Canada and the United States can't afford where they live. The study shows nearly 2/3 of renters in both countries struggle to pay their rent. Researcher Tyler Kay says expensive rent can drive up homelessness and crime rates. The city of Saskatoon says it needs more time before holding a public meeting to discuss a new emergency shelter in the Sutherland neighborhood. So the information sessions for this week are being postponed until later this month. The 30-space facility would be located in the old fire station on Central Avenue. And bird watching in Saskatchewan has hit the big time. Living Sky Wildlife Rehabilitation says that it's seeing more and more international tourists, including in the wintertime. Stan Chaddock says Saskatchewan is a great place to see birds like snowy owls and the northern shrike, which aren't found in many places this far south. And I'll have a full newscast for you coming up at 1 o'clock.
David, thank you.
You're welcome.
That is the CBC's David Shield. I'm Leisha Grabinski. You're listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. The number to call to join the conversation today about the history of the Sask Party and where the party is headed, 1-800-716-2221, or email bluesky@cbc.ca. With me is Ken and Gail Kravetz. Ken Kravetz, one of the founding members of the Sask Party. But Ken, you have a unique position, just as June Drowdy, someone who has served as education minister in this province. And so interesting to hear Ms. Drowdy say, that she reads the headlines and her question is, what happened in the background to get to this point? And so I'm wondering what's going through your mind with the labor dispute right now. What do you make of this labor dispute between teachers and the government?
Well, over time, there's always been disputes with labor, whether it be with nurses. I recall way back in opposition, there were nurses at the legislature that were protesting. And, those things continue. What has to happen, though, is that there has to be a decision by both groups, whether it's government trustee bargaining team or whether it's the Teachers Federation, to sit down at a table and determine what is best for Saskatchewan, whether it's the salary component and benefits that teachers wish, or whether it's indeed the pressures of facing a teacher in a classroom. I began my career as a teacher back in 1972, and I taught for 11 years. I was principal as well. And then I spent 9 years on a school board. So, my 20 years of education experience, I'll tell you, it's a lot different today. Yes, I had 37 students in my grade 7 homeroom, but I didn't have an EA, and of course, I did the best job of I could as a teacher. Today, there are many more challenges that teachers face in the classroom. And we need to understand those challenges. We need to respect that. But as the Premier has said and the Minister of Education, every school division has different challenges. And those challenges are to be addressed by the division board. They are the elected people at that level. I've been criticized as the education minister, who indeed was part of a government decision that we no longer allowed school boards to the education property tax, the ability to set the mill rates, because we had tax revolts and we had people that were extremely upset. But I think and a lot of it has to do with inflation, and as June mentioned, COVID. There were many different things that have happened over the last 4 years that have put us where we are today with the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation. I'm hopeful that the common sense approach is going to be taken, and what we need to do is to ensure that we meet the needs of children, of students, and that's going to be done through the bargaining process. That will be done with sitting down with school boards and developing policy at the school board level that indeed is going to address those challenges.
Was it still the right move to change how education is funded? I'm sure you've been reflecting on that quite a bit lately.
Oh, absolutely. No, it was the right move. The government is the sole funder of healthcare. There's no other source of revenue. In the past, of course, with assessments, and I know, Alicia, you're familiar with tax assessments and the assessments, school divisions who had the ability to have highly assessed regions, whether it be a potash mine or railway companies, they had the ability to raise local dollars very easily. And in other areas where there were no such benefits, the mill rate went up and up and up, and that's why we had tax revolts. So it's the decision was made that government would be the sole funder of education, but that's a challenge as well, because when you make a decision at the education level to ensure that a newly negotiated contract is fully funded by government, and that's been the case for years and years and years. But there's also the other side of that coin, because there's about 30 to 35% that is non-teaching salaries. They're the costs at the school division level. As I said, as a board chair for 9 years, we were always worried about the costs of insurance to insure the schools, the fuel for transportation. There are many other costs that school boards face, and that is where I think government has to recognize and work with school boards to say, okay, what is the money necessary to provide a good education system?
Do you think that this could damage the Sask Party? I mean, we've got this new poll suggesting that decided voters in Saskatchewan's two largest cities are now leaning towards the NDP for the next election. 49% of decided voters would cast a ballot in favor of the NDP. 47% would vote for the Sask Party. This was an Insightrix poll. Data was collected from 800 people. The observers might be saying, like, look, we've got teachers and the government so far apart right now. You see the results from this poll. Are people not as quick to support the Sask Party, after seeing how this labor dispute has played out?
Well, absolutely. There are people who are going to look at this issue and say, Sask Party is wrong. They should have done this. They should have done that. But it's, as June pointed out, government has to do an analysis of the current situation. And you have to remember, a poll is just a moment in time. Today is a difficult time for the Sask Party in the cities, the two largest cities, Regina and Saskatoon. So the government has to understand this. And as we look at healthcare and where we were years ago, I remember, under the NDP, the closure of 52 hospitals, the closure of my hospital was seen as a terrible thing that happened. So when we look at also, if I could add a little bit, in 2016 is when I decided not to seek re-election. In 2016, I believe there were 9 or 10 of us who were either former cabinet ministers or in the case of Don Toth, he was the speaker. Speaker, that year there was that many people who decided that we were done after 5 terms or 4 terms or 3 terms, just like you see today. You see a number of MLAs who have already committed to the fact that no, 1 term is enough. In the case of Dana Scorapad, who said, I do not want to stay in politics anymore. Or in the case of, Randy Weeks, the current Speaker, who was not nominated in his own constituency. My replacement was Terry Dennis in the Kenora Pelly constituency. And the membership, well over 1,000 people, Sask Party members in Kenora Pelly, have selected a different candidate for the next election. Those things happen every election campaign. The NDP already, longtime serving member for the North, Doyle Vermette, has announced that he is not seeking re-election. So those things continue, and yes, people will react today, and probably tomorrow, some of the people that you polled today may react differently tomorrow.
Gail, I want to ask you, where do you see the priorities of the Saskatchewan Party government? What are the priorities right now of the current government, do you think?
Well, I don't think the priorities have shifted. I mean, when I listen to the news, I just see the demands are still there. I mean, they're being requested to fund and, bring, help out so many different things. I mean, it has shifted. Now we see homelessness being a big issue. We see the whole issue with drug use has happened. And, I feel I saw what Ken went through as the finance minister and trying to make the budget work. I know that Donna's probably had the same thing. You have all these asks. And, I mean, healthcare, that's always been a priority for the government. We look and see what's happening right across the country. It's the same in every province. So I don't think their priorities have shifted, but I think there are new areas that have come to the forefront, and like with social service and so on, and so it's a balancing act. The thing is, we want more. I often say, if we want more, I wonder if people, because we talk about the cost of living going up, are people prepared to necessarily have to pay more? That's a question, but I mean, and there's always new issues because our population has grown, and with growth comes always new challenges.
People want to talk to the both of you today and want to talk about this. So we've got a number of emails and callers who are standing by. So let's get through a few of these. So Kevin writes, I voted for the Sask Party in the past, but frankly, I would not if an election was held today. The party today, as I see it, is far more concerned about engaging in political theater to make it appear that they are working hard, pronoun laws, constant bickering with the feds over carbon taxes, than they are about actually finding solutions to meaningful issues, crumbling healthcare and the education system. Before we go to one of our callers, Ken Kravets, if you want to respond to that, because, we have heard about some of the main issues, homelessness, substance use disorders, all of that, and yet the government called the legislature back early to push through changes to a pronoun policy. So what do you think of Kevin, what Kevin is raising there?
Well, first of all, the decisions that government makes are after many, many hours of debate, whether it's at the caucus level where all of the Sask Party caucus members that are elected have a chance to voice their opinion, or whether it occurs at cabinet. And those happen after many, many hours of debate, and still are going on. So for Kevin's, statement that, Sask Party is way out there doing these small things, bickering or challenging the federal government. Yes, those are things that you see in the media, but you don't always see the debate that occurs as to whether or not there should be, more money spent on a urgent care center here in Regina that's going to open up very soon. Those are the kinds of debates that occur right across government, in cabinet, whether or not we should be building a brand new school in an area, or whether or not because the school is full already today, that we should be doing. Those are ongoing discussions. They never stop. When I was finance minister and I delivered a budget in March, the very first Treasury Board meeting was probably in April, and that is already planning next year's budget. So those are kinds of things that go on all the time. I hope that Kevin takes a broader view of what goes on in government. It's not just the simple things that you see on a newspaper or in social media.
Or in social media, yes. That is the biggest change probably since you were last in politics. We could do a whole show on being a politician today and how that's influenced by social media. But let's go to Dwayne in Carrot River, who joins us right now on the line. Hi, Dwayne.
Good afternoon. I just want to interject just a little bit of truth and realism into this conversation. The only reason Sask Party was formed was because the Divine government had left things in such a mess and was so corrupt, no one wanted to even hear about Conservatives, and certainly nobody wanted to run under the name Conservatives. So the same people changed their name to Sask Party, and then when people asked them questions, they could say, oh, well, that's the old party. We're not anything to do with that. And that's the truth.
Well, Dwayne, you're stretching it, and you and I have had these conversations before many times.
Gail, do you want to jump in there, though, because you are the historian?
Right.
And there's some validity to what Dwayne said there.
Let's go back to the 1995 election, because that's where my book begins. So he's right. There was a lot of controversy with the Divine government and scandal and such. But interestingly enough, 5 members were reelected in the midst of all of that. And everybody said the PC party was done. They were going to be wiped off the electoral map. They weren't. 5 members were elected. Liberal Party was expected to do much better than what they did, and they didn't. I can't remember the number of seats right offhand. But those 5 that came back, one of them was a brand new member, Ben Hepner. And so in the midst of all that controversy, people saw something in Ben and elected him. So, I don't think it is a stretch to say those 5 were not associated with what had happened before, and they moved on, and they got into conversations with some of the Liberals and began to realize that there was vote splitting going on in the province. Many of the NDP members were being elected by way less than 50%. So more people were voting for the other 2 parties than they were for the NDP. And so the Liberals and Conservatives said, we have to stop this. And there had always been talk about having a new party and taking that vote. But it was always talk. The difference, and when I was talking to some of the university professors, they said the difference this time was these were 8 sitting MLAs. They had a presence in the House. And, if Dwayne wants to talk about this being, like them just jumping, a lot of people in the province didn't see that because in the 1999 election, this new Sask Party won the popular vote.
Dwayne, thank you for calling and bringing that up. I always appreciate listeners adding to the conversation. So, Dwayne, thank you. Here's an email from Roy that I'll share with you. Roy writes, Insightrix gives the NDP a 2-point lead provincially and a wide lead in Regina and Saskatoon. However, the NDP should not break out the champagne just yet. Insightrix also has the Sask Party at 59% in rural Saskatchewan and gives them a surprising 54% of the vote in northern Saskatchewan. Scott Moe has added 3 totally unnecessary seats in rural Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan, with a population of 1.1 million, will have 61 seats in its legislative assembly. Manitoba, with a population of 1.3 million, has 57 seats. Why this imbalance? Because Scott Moe can now win a majority government with a single seat from Regina and Saskatoon. The Insightrix poll is positive news for the NDP, but it doesn't necessarily mean change is in the wind. So quite a few things there. Ken, I am interested, though, in the rural-urban divide and how important are the cities important still to the Sask Party?
Oh, absolutely. The cities are important. Regina and Saskatoon, Saskatoon being the largest city in the province. We've had every 10 years, there's a redrawing of the boundaries to meet the challenges of depopulation in rural Saskatchewan, and new constituencies are created around Saskatoon, especially in the area of Warman and Martensville. There's always growth, and we do have 1.2 million people. And I think the person who sent you in that email is reflecting that this is the first time that there's going to be 61 elected MLAs. We've had 61 MLAs for a long time already. And the current House reflects all 61, whether they be sitting as independents, as Nadine Wilson is, or whether they be the NDP, the New Democratic Party members. But there's 61 currently in the House, and there has been 61 for a while. So he's right in this respect. The challenge is that it's 61 individuals that will get elected across all of Saskatchewan, northern Saskatchewan, the cities, rural Saskatchewan. And that is the challenge that every political party faces as you move towards an election campaign. And I believe the writ will be dropped if the elections is going to be at the end of October. It's going to be dropped, in not too many months down the road, end of September, and there'll be a writ, and we will be in an election campaign, and there will be campaigning in every one of those 61 constituencies.
Let's go to Jacob in Saskatoon, who joins us right now on the line. Hi, Jacob.
Hi. I don't know what to say here. I think the Sask Party did okay under Brad Wall. I think they made a real big mistake with what they did, taking the taxing power away from local school boards and shifting it to urban consumers. You've got a real shift in ownership of rural farmland from Saskatchewan owners to foreign owners, and none of them are helping pay the burden of the school tax, the school funding anymore. That's all been shifted to urban consumers. It's added to urban hardship. They talk about the province growing. Well, in the 1920s, Saskatchewan had around 12% of Canada's population. Now we're about 3%. So we've just been falling behind. They haven't been doing a good job at all.
Ken, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I don't know where to go with that one. When you look at the population of Saskatchewan, we've always been in that 4% area for decades and decades. So yes, we're growing, but so is Canada, and we're still serving that amount. As far as the tax shift, that's not quite correct, because what we did is that it's still called the education property tax on property and the assessments, but that is a government tax. Yes, municipalities, whether they be rural or urban, still collect that tax, but that tax goes directly to the province of Saskatchewan. And as I said in one of my earlier comments, Leisha, is that it is the responsibility of government to fully fund education based on the collection of taxes from many, many sources. The transfer, and again, I'm just going to use the K-12 budgets. I think this year the budgets to the 27 school divisions, the transfer of grant money was in the excess of $2.2 billion.
But is that enough?
At the moment, when you look at where we are with a negotiations and contract, probably not. And that's why I think the next budget, and I don't have any information, but I'm sure Treasury Board, led by Finance Minister Donna Harpower, has been, spending hours and hours looking at the pot of money that exists. And as one of my colleagues used to always say, there's never a bad request that comes to Treasury Board for additional funding. Everybody wants a new long-term care facility. They want a highway improved. They want to deal with homelessness. They want to deal with the drugs. But what you have to do as a Treasury Board is determine, here's the money that you have, and what are the priorities that government needs to fund.
Okay. I think that last caller was Jacob. So, Jacob, I'll say thanks to you for calling. We'll move on to our next caller, Wayne in Beaver Flats. Hello, Wayne.
Good afternoon. Ken, welcome to the show. And I voted for the Sask Party in 2007, probably because of the likes of Ken and what he brought to the table. And I think we're missing that. So, Ken, come out of retirement, and I'll vote for you again. The likes of him and June and others. And why I say that is because they were tired of what was, and they brought new ideas, fresh ideas, new light to the province, which worked. And unfortunately, what I have seen happen is a significant movement to the right. What they're still hanging on to a bit of the center, but not enough to meet the needs of a growing population. And hence we're seeing that current labor disruption is growing, because I think the funding hasn't kept up with the needs of the kids and people using hospitals and that. I think that's where we're at. And I just want to say it was so refreshing to hear Ken on the radio. And like I say, Ken, I'll work your corner if you come out of retirement.
Well, thank you very much, Wayne, for the confidence in me. You know, April 4th coming up, I will have been out of that elected position for 8 years already. So I thank you very much for your confidence in me. I look at new people coming on board, and I know, Alicia, you asked June this question about who do we see leading the party. We see exciting young people just like I was. In 1995 when I entered politics. I entered politics in Kenora-Pelly, which was also a very part of what was known as Red Square at that time. And I know there's many listeners today who are, under the age of 35, and all they have seen since 2007, of course, is the Sask Party being government. Well, there were 10 years before we were a government, we were opposition, and you learn to represent the people. And I think the comments made by June about young people having to listen. We traveled the province in 1997 when we were forming the party. The 8 of us traveled from one corner of the province to the other corner as we were developing policy.
I want to jump in there right now, because I think this is a great segue to talk about what will happen next and whether or not they will put in the work that you did when you were first.
Have to.
Yeah. But it is interesting because the party now has been in power for 17 years. And I think some people would argue that now there's a sense of entitlement. And June Drowdy pointed out that there's no one left in the Sask Party after these people, the four big names leave. Nobody has sat in the opposition, and to not have that understanding of what it's like to be in the opposition. So maybe these will probably be our last few little comments here. So, Gail, maybe I'll start with you. Knowing that the party's been in power for 17 years, that there perhaps is a sense of entitlement, that you have nobody who's been in the opposition. Where do you think the party needs to go next to remain relevant and leading into and what they need to do leading into this next election?
I just think they have to look back at the basic principles of why the party was formed. I know that the current administration, I'll say, of the party, they're very much in promoting the history of the party. They like to remind the new members of this is where it came from and this is what we want you to remember, what people went through to form this party and why this party was formed. But I'm very hopeful. I get excited when I'm happy to see that we have a number of women candidates that have been nominated. I think they bring a great deal to the party, and I know there'll be renewal. Every party goes through it, and they will work their way through it. And the longer a party stays in government, the more people are going to expect of them and pick things apart. And it's going to be a tough battle in many of the ridings, but I think they'll come through.
Ken, I'll give the last word to you.
Well, exactly. I've heard this word entitlement that I, as a member, became elected because I wanted to get this benefit or that benefit. I can tell you that is the furthest from the truth. All MLAs are equal in terms whether you're opposition or government. You have the same remuneration. And for someone to think that they're entitled, I still walk up the legislative steps now as just a constituent in the province of Saskatchewan, and I'm in awe of that place. It's a great building. It's a great place to work. And you always have to remember, I don't think it has anything to do with entitlement. You have to have in the back of your mind as an elected official, I am here to serve.
It has been wonderful having both of you with us today on the show. I've really appreciated this conversation, a bit of a history lesson and a way to look forward. So, Gail and Ken Kravetz, thank you to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
It's Gail and Ken Kravetz. They joined us in our Regina studio today. Ken Kravetz, one of the original 8 Saskatchewan Party members, and Gail is the author of Risk and Reward, The Birth of the Saskatchewan Party. We also spoke to June Drowdy, who was one of the original members of the Saskatchewan Party. And so if you missed that, we will be posting this on our CBC Listen app, on YouTube as well, so you can find it on demand.